Hello, and a very warm welcome to another episode of Political Economy with Shweta Punj. We are discussing here the different policies that are shaping India. We're debriefing them for you, and we're making you understand, or at least trying to defog some of the important developments that are shaping India's polity and economy. The show that decodes complicated policies for you. Now, there has been so much talk in the last 10 years about reforms. India, every government has spoken about the importance of reforms, and in any country's development trajectory, it's very important to undertake these big moves or these big policy decisions to to get the country to progress and to catch up with the rest of the world. In this episode today, we are going to be focusing on the important reforms that have shaped our country in the last 10 years. Why are we focusing on the last 10 years? It's because if when you look at India's political trajectory, before barring this last decade, India has had several coalition governments. So whenever we speak about a reform period, we refer back to the 1991 reforms, because that's when we saw a complete overhaul in which the way India wanted to project itself to the world, and in which India India opened itself to the world. After that, since then, we've seen only incremental reforms, and a big reason for that is because we've always had coalition governments. We've had several political parties form a government and come into power with one majority, with one political party getting a majority, and that's how governments have been formed. Now that makes it difficult for governments. When there's a coalition government, it makes it difficult for governments to push through what are known as difficult reforms, what are known as controversial reforms. Now, but in the last 10 years, we've had a very strong absolute majority government. It's not been a coalition government. This is a government that came into power with the promise of bringing in reforms. Now, what are reforms? Reforms are decisions, are policy decisions. Sometimes it refers to doing away with certain old policies and bring in new policies which are in tune with today's times. Sometimes they are controversial decisions which are not very politically popular, but they are good for the economy. Now, to understand what are these reforms in the last 10 years, what are the five big reforms that that India has rolled out that have done well for India, and five big reforms that have not done so well, that could have been handled better. We are doing this conversation at this time because we are going in for general elections, and it's our endeavor to inform the voters on the issues they are voting for, and to help them understand and evaluate their choices before they go and cast this vote. And to understand this and to break this down, I have with me Mr. Nilesh Shah. Mr. Nilesh Shah is, of course, very well known amongst in India's corporate circles. But beyond that, he has also been part of the Prime Minister Economic Advisory Council. So he wears two hats. He has the eyes and ears of corporate India, but he also has the ear of the government of India, and he's been advising the government on several reforms. He also gives them a mood check of the investor sentiment, and that helps drive a lot of policies. Mr. Shah, a very warm welcome to the show. Delighted to have you here with us. Thank you so much for joining us. I have to, begin by asking you if you could explain to our listeners and to our viewers on, the definition of reforms. We all talk about reforms, and I tried to explain a bit of that in my introduction, but let's begin with the very basics.
If we say reform, ideally it means anything, any step, any policy measure which will improve future over the present. This is the simplest definition of reform. Any step which will make your tomorrow better than today is a reform.
Right. So any step that will make your tomorrow better than today. Now, Mr. Shah, let's go across to let's go back to this last decade, and what a decade it has been, right? And now we're going in for elections once again. Now, this is a decade where India in terms of its image in the world right now, it's at an all-time high. We seem to have emerged as the sweet spot for the world to really look at and invest in. What is driving this interest, Mr. Shah? If we could, if we could go back and if you could list out the number one reform that you think that the government brought in, and then we'll talk about the others as well, that really helped change our perception of what we are as a country and what we represent to the world.
So the world today is looking positively to India because one, it is probably the only democratic country which is showing growth in the emerging market space. We have seen success stories in China, but that's autocratic. There are very few democratically governed countries which can claim in emerging market space to become third largest economy of the world. There is focus on India because it sets an example for the rest of the emerging market that within the constraints of democracy also it is possible to create growth. The second reason why world is looking positively in India, because from being coach of the global growth train, now we are becoming part of the engine. Earlier, our contribution to incremental global GDP growth was low single digit. Hence, we were the coach. If world moved, we will move forward. Now, our contribution to incremental global GDP is in high single digit. Along with China and US, if we move forward, the whole world will move forward, which is why world is recognizing and positively looking towards India. Now, if we go back to our history, in 1947, we had probably higher per capita GDP than Japan. Japan was devastated in Second World War. In 1960, we had higher per capita GDP than South Korea. In 1980, we had higher per capita GDP than China. Today, all of them are way ahead of us. Even Asian countries like Sri Lanka and Bangladesh are either ahead of us or near us. Undoubtedly, we haven't able to unleash our economic potential as much as we should have created or as much as we should have achieved. Now, in last 10 years, since 2014, we have moved from 10th largest economy to 5th largest economy globally. And we are well on our way to become third largest economy. This is indeed a great achievement. Never before in our history we have jumped 5 spots in global economy like last 10 years. We have a long distance to cover. In per capita GDP, we are still way below other peers. Now, in last 10 years, what have we done and how things are moving forward? The first, we have become in the Panchtantra story from Billy to monkey. If you remember old Panchtantra story, there were two cats who found a piece of bread and the cunning monkey took over their bread. We are now transiting to keeping India first. There was a time when we were buying oil from Iran in rupee with 6 months credit, with rupees lying in Indian bank account and used for purchasing goods from it. When America put sanction on Iran, we let go that advantage. Who captured our roti, our bread? China. They became the whole importer of Iranian oil. This time, when US put sanction on Russia, India was able to stand its ground and say that, look, we need to import Russian oil. We will import whichever or whoever provides us cheaper oil. So the first thing which has changed is India first policy. We have to be aware about our interest and protect them rather than blindly copying other people. हमारी रोटी हमें खानी चाहिए, औरों को नहीं देनी चाहिए.
Hmm.
The second thing which is happening in India is Triveni Sangam of talent, capital, and infrastructure. Pre
Right.
90s, Indian talent used to go abroad. All the batches of IITs and IIM, our premium educational institution, used to go abroad. Today, many of them are staying back. There's a statement of Shantanu Narayan of Adobe that if I was growing up in today's India, I would not leave Hyderabad to go to US. This retention of talent is the most positive thing which government has done. The second,
Hmm.
talent requires capital. Pre 1990, you really needed your parents' money to start a business. Today, there is private equity and venture capital ecosystem. The startup India is enabling availability of capital to good ideas. Talent and capital combined is creating wonders for Indian growth. Now, they get crippled by lack of infrastructure. We were always short on infrastructure. Our ports were congested. We needed to wait for 10 years to get a landline connection. Our
That's right.
roads were not really developed. In 2014 to 24, government and private sector put together has built almost similar infrastructure which was existing in 2013. Airports, roads, ports, telecom, power, coal mining, metro. We are almost doubling our capacity in last 10 years. Now, this Triveni Sangam of talent, capital, and infrastructure has
Hmm.
changed India from being coach to the global growth train to becoming engine of the global growth train. I think these two reforms, keeping India first and combining talent, capital, and infrastructure, is laying the
Hmm.
foundation for the India's Amrit Kal.
Right. So, Mr. Shah, both these things, putting India first and the Triveni Sangam of keeping retaining talent, building infrastructure, and so on, that stems from the possibility and from the promise of India, and India is able to reinforce itself better on the global stage, also because now it comes from a stronger position of a promise that, okay, this is the country where you'll get the returns, and this is the country where we mean business. That's the message that's gone out. I want you to help us understand, like, so when we look back in the last 10 years from IBC to this whole shift towards UPI, which has become a case study for the rest of the world, those are very significant developments. Whether it's Make in India, so a lot of these things that we hadn't really thought of. I remember growing up in the 90s, and you're right, getting some there would be few houses that would actually have a telephone. We did not grow up with cable television, so I think my generation has seen so much change in the last 2 decades that it's almost feeling like we are getting old very quickly because there's just so much happening. If we could go back to some of the audacious or the visionary moves that you think that have come in from India, that one needs to take into account to understand, or to really make sense of India's trajectory going forward from 2024, what would they be?
So, one is obviously the digital stake. Aadhaar was launched before 2014. But the
Yes.
way Jam Trinity happened, Jantan account, mobile, and Aadhaar combined, it removed the leakages from the distribution of subsidies from government to the recipient. Now there are no intermediaries. Money reaches to the customer directly. And this is indeed a great achievement. Sometime back, a German minister was heard saying that Germany wants to transfer money to its citizens, but we are not able to do more than 100,000 transactions a day. A small bank in India will be doing 100,000 transactions a day on the digital stake. In the digital world, we are way above many of the developed nations. In US, vaccination certificate comes on a piece of paper. In India, it's coming through a digital ecosystem. In Germany, as I mentioned, their ability to transfer money to their citizens is 100,000 transactions a day. We transfer 110 million Indians, every quarter in Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Yojana. So digital stake is undoubtedly the crowning glory of India. In digital ecosystem, India is a developed world, and other countries are looking forward to catch up with us in our Jandan, Aadhaar, Mobile, CoWIN, ONDC, and so on and so on and so forth. The
Hmm.
other thing which we have done is again providing financial flexibility to our ecosystem. Or let me rephrase it, we have provided our financial ecosystem necessary resilience. On one side, it came through IBC. There was a time, Shweta, where companies used to go bankrupt, but promoters used to go rich. In an arranged marriage, it was quite common to ask how many times the other person has defaulted. That means their financial condition would have been better. The corporates
Wow.
used to remain under the control of promoter with minority stakes, even though they were derailing the company, even though they were siphoning off the money. Through the IBC regulations today, there is fear among the defaulters that my company will be taken away. The second challenge was COVID time. There were two options for India: throw money like Western world or do something out of box. We really thought out of box to provide guarantees rather than throwing money. We created more supply side resilience than demand side, and that resulted into a much better recovery post COVID compared to Western worlds. In fact, between two crises of 2008 subprime and 2022 COVID, India is the only major economy in the world whose debt to GDP ratio has come down. All credit to corporate India and household India, which got deleveraged. Government did increase its debt to GDP ratio because of funding COVID expenditure. But overall, as a country, we deleveraged, which no other country has been able to do.
Hmm.
This two things, creating digital stake and providing resilience to our financial ecosystem, has ensured that our growth in the years to come will be better compared to the rest of the world.
Hmm. So the promise of growth, bringing in more accountability on, or somebody had referred to us as a banana republic some time ago, a long time ago actually, and the kind of lawlessness that one saw, and this fact that you bring in that in an arranged marriage a question would be asked on how many times have you defaulted. I think you're right, because that was the norm. And not too long ago we did have a list from the RBI on the dirty dozen companies that had defaulted, and there were very big names there. So that was the norm, and so those things have gotten fixed somewhat. Of course, we still have a long way to go. Mr. Shah, I want you to talk about, how do economic reforms affect return on investments? Because somewhere it's there is so much interest amongst the investor community, because they're hoping and they're banking on returns that will come in. Now, in 2024, when the new government comes in, uh, one, if we could talk about how do we take this reform agenda forward, and second, if you could talk a little bit about on what investors need to watch out for as the dominant themes going forward in 2024, the things that could determine their investments and the kind of returns that could come in because of reforms.
So the return on investment for a country, for a corporate, and for an individual will be different, but invariably linked together. For example, government gave 1,70,000 crore to BSNL, MTNL for funding their losses and recapitalizing them.
Yeah.
At one point of time, MTNL had bigger market cap than Reliance Industries Limited, India's largest market cap company. Over the years, MTNL kept on declining. BSNL followed the same fate. If I remember correctly, BSNL was the first company in India to make 10,000 crore profit. But eventually it kept on declining, and both combined needed 1,70,000 crore money from the government. Now, is there a return on that investment? Answer is undoubtedly it is going to be poor. If that money, imagine if we had sold off MTNL when its market cap was bigger than Reliance Industries Limited and invested that money into primary healthcare, into education, what
Hmm.
return on investment India would have generated. So as a country, when we don't take right decision, country has to pay a price, and country is nothing but its citizens. The same thing works in capital market or corporate India. You commit investments in something which fails, you pay a price. You commit investment in something which works and you benefit. Today, we believe corporate India is in a far better situation as it has improved its capital allocation policy. We
Hmm.
are generating higher return on capital employed and return on equity than most emerging market peers as well as developed market peers. And which is why we are seeing that a company like Maruti Suzuki India sells more automobiles in India than what Suzuki sells worldwide. It is
Hmm.
making economies of scale in small cars, and it is probably the most competent producer of small car in the world. And now using that competency, that economies of scale to export worldwide. So return on investment is the most important parameter for capital allocation, whether it's for government, whether it's for corporates, or whether it is for individuals.
Hmm. Right. So I want, if you could talk a little bit about the dominant themes that will emerge for investors now in 2024, with the possibility of this government coming back into power. Uh, how do you see that playing out for the investor community? And if we cannot, we when we have you with us, we need to get some investment advice also. So, if you could just share some of that with us.
So the most prominent theme will be China plus one. Globally, many companies and countries are willing to outsource their requirement to country other than China. There is a huge competition. Vietnam, Mexico, many countries are doing better than India. We must go and capture this opportunity like we have captured in mobile phones and toys. We believe
Hmm.
there will be many companies in India which will become part of global supply chain. Either they'll supply to their parent or they'll supply to the rest of the world. India
Hmm.
itself is a large domestic market on its way to become third largest economy. And on top of it, if you start exporting, becoming part of global supply chain, then you will have economies of scale and your competitiveness will increase. We believe companies in engineering, chemicals, and such other sectors should become part of this manufacturing boom. It's a multi-year boom. It's a multi-year trend like we
Hmm.
witnessed in technology sector or generic pharma sector. We will see many manufacturing companies out of India doing very well over the years by supplying domestic market as well as global market. The second trend which we believe should do well over a period of time is related to IT. Globally, artificial intelligence, generative AI is changing the landscape of IT industry. Some of the global names like Atos and Telenos are going into bankruptcy. Certainly, they will emerge out of bankruptcy with their government support, but customer confidence will be shaken. That will be very beneficial to Indian IT companies whose balance sheet is very, very strong. Indian IT companies are also leveraging AI to deliver faster, cheaper, better solution to the customers. combination of our usage of AI and our healthier balance sheet compared to some of the global names should create some sort of growth momentum in IT sector, and that should provide an investment opportunity in the days to come. I think manufacturing and IT services, these are some of the themes which will run over a period of time. Undoubtedly, the most evergreen theme will be domestic focused company. India's growth rate will be at least 2 to 3 times higher than global growth rate. And there's so much more work to be done in India. Domestic focus related sectors like auto, cement, construction, real estate, they all should do well as Indian economy moves from fifth to third largest economy.
Fantastic. Um, we cannot not talk about the reforms that have not gone as planned. Mr. Shah, there have been the reforms also can go both ways, right? You think that you're doing something and with all good intentions, but it can backfire, or it cannot have the desired impact. Any specific lessons or any specific reforms that you think have not gone out as planned, and now with as we get a new government, any lessons that we should learn from those reforms that should not be repeated, or mistakes that should not be repeated?
So undoubtedly, we have a long distance to cover. The first and the foremost is appreciation. Somehow or other, as Indians, we don't appreciate our own local talent, and many people don't experiment for fear of failure. I'll give you an example. There was a doctor called Dr. Subhas Mukhopadhyay. He
Hmm.
got PhD in reproductive biology from University of Kolkata as well as University of Edinburgh. In the days when he got PhD, most talent will stay there and work, but he decided to return to India. He created India's first test tube baby. That girl, Kanupriya Agarwal, is now a mother and stays in North India.
Hmm.
Most importantly, Dr. Subhas Mukhopadhyay's test tube baby came immediately within 2 months of world's first test tube baby, which was created in University of Edinburgh.
Yeah.
The creator in University of Edinburgh got Nobel Prize. What did we do to Dr. Subhas Mukhopadhyay, who worked wonders with limited budget? We thought he was a cheat. We went after him in such a manner that eventually he committed suicide. There's a beautiful movie made called Ek Doctor Ki Maut.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Indians should not do. We should never ever repeat that mistake of pulling down our own brothers and sisters. Someone who should have got Nobel Prize, we ensured that he committed suicide. Never ever should India repeat that mistake. The
Hmm.
second thing, again, is our judicial infrastructure. We have cases which run for a long period of time. Our contract enforceability is probably one of the lowest in the world. Today, when global investors come to India, they prefer arbitration in Singapore and outside of India rather than India.
True.
We need to ensure that our judicial infrastructure is best in the world. It needs to get credibility that any global investor who wants to come to India will keep their place of arbitration as India and not Singapore or any other country. The
Absolutely.
third thing, we have to create investments in research and development. We are Jugaad people, but we have to invest through research. Today, artificial intelligence is the highway on which we are running and paying the toll to the creators of highway. But does India not have talent to create its own foundation of artificial intelligence? Can we not create a highway on which other people will walk and pay us the toll rather than we walking on someone's highway and paying the toll? I think as Indians, we are capable of investing for research and development. We will be able to create most cost effective solution. We have been
Hmm.
doing something right. For example, in cancer research, CAR T cell technology, we launched in India almost along with US at 90% cheaper prices. And with scale, we'll probably make it 95% cheaper. That kind of research and development we need to do. So I will say, as Indians, we need to develop confidence. We should not be pulling down our brothers and sisters. Second,
Hmm.
we have to improve our judicial infrastructure. And third, and the most important, we have to invest in research and development for the future.
So, before we conclude this, Mr. Shah, we're talking about the mistakes that should not be repeated. Now, in the last several months, there have been a lot of tax notices that have been sent out to a lot of companies, a lot of individuals. In the cases of companies, a lot of startups even, and the amount that is being asked of them is maybe in some cases even 100 times more than their actual revenues for the year. So, when we talk now, this has become a big pain point, right? And and we've had this ghosts of the past still haunting us. We still remember that entire retrospective taxation that was really very, very detrimental to India's reputation, and it took us a long time to get out of that shadow. Now with these notices coming, a lot of Indians are also moving out to Dubai and London and so on. That is also happening. A lot of HNIs are just don't want to deal with all of this, or that's what they say. uh, how do you think do we draw the fine line, in ensuring compliance, tax compliance, yet not being too heavy-handed in our approach that comes to the point of stifling innovation and driving talent away?
So, Sweta, that's a very, very good point. Today, why are people leaving India? Some people are leaving for better opportunities, but many are staying back. Some people are leaving for better quality of life, as most Indian cities are very crowded and they are infrastructure constrained. And we have the worst polluted cities in the world. And
Absolutely.
some people are also leaving because they believe in outside world they will get better policy environment. Now we obviously have to ensure that we improve our urban infrastructure so that people feel like staying here. We have to improve our judicial infrastructure so people believe that they will have good policy and they will have ability to fight back if there is a need. Essentially, all these things can be combined in ease of doing investment and ease of living. Today, our entrepreneur is still like an Abhimanyu in chakravyuh. Abhimanyu went into chakravyuh on his own will. Our entrepreneurs are born in chakravyuh. And Abhimanyu
Hmm.
was fighting only Kauravas. Our entrepreneurs are not only fighting Kauravas, which is market volatility, raw material uncertainty, China competition, and so on and so forth, but also the Pandavas, which is the compliance burden, which is the approvals and processes. Undoubtedly, we'll have to unshackle our Abhimanyu. Even in Mahabharata, Abhimanyu lost while he was only fighting Kaurav. How can our Abhimanyu win if he has to fight both Kaurav as well as Pandavas together? So, undoubtedly, the biggest task for the government is improving ease of doing investment for corporate India and entrepreneurs and ease of living for the citizens of India.
Absolutely. So now Mumbai has beaten Beijing in terms of the number of billionaires. After London and New York, we have New Delhi, Mumbai, sorry, Mumbai as the billionaire capital, which is great news. But I was having a conversation yesterday, and that's when it struck us. So Delhi has poisonous air. Mumbai has no space and roads from hell. And Bangalore, our Silicon Valley, is currently under a severe water crisis. So as in my view, in 2024, while we are talking about Amrit Kal, true Amrit Kal will be this tackling basic living issues. Because I think while we are building highways and freeways and so on, somewhere we're ignoring these very basic things, Mr. Shah.
So, Shweta, there's no point in blaming government alone. The citizens are also responsible. And I have read about a gentleman called Abid Bhai. Abid Bhai was a person who, for lifelong, went to everyone's house and fixed their leaking tap. You know, in many of our houses, taps continue to leak and result into wastage of water.
Hmm.
Instead of calling plumber, we'll just tolerate it, saying that chota chota drops gir raha hai. Abid Bhai's mission in life was to fix those leaking taps, and he kept on doing it. How much water he would have saved. And every
Correct.
one of us has to become Abid Bhai. We have to be a responsible citizen. When we go to Singapore, we will not throw litter on the ground. When we come to India, we don't bother about it. It's our own country. The government is not going to improve it. We have to improve it ourselves.
No, no, that's true. That's true. I agree with you. We have to improve ourselves. And also, I think somewhere if you leave it to voluntary compliance, maybe it doesn't work. So maybe we need more stricter punitive compliances that really prod citizens to think better. But having said that, I would hope that climate change comes up as an important electoral issue. We'll have the manifestos next week, so we'll see what comes out. But citizens, you're right, citizens need to be evolved, and politicians also need to change in the way they're thinking and in the way they're tackling and prioritizing these issues over others is my 2 cents to this. Thank you very much, Mr. Shah, for joining us and breaking down the India reform story so beautifully. Of course, we'll have you back on this show post elections now, and to get a sense or to set the agenda for the new government. Thank you so much.
Thank you.